She's just a farmer's daughter. She doesn't belong at Westmont Academy. The principal's dismissive words still hung in the air when the next morning a presidential helicopter descended onto the school's immaculate lawn. Her jaw dropped. A secret. Service agents in dark suits and earpieces formed a perimeter, marching purposefully toward her office. "We're here about Olivia Harmon," the stern-faced chief of staff announced, "and we have some questions about your expulsion policies. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Westmont Academy stood like an imposing sentinel against the crisp autumn skyline. Its Georgian-style architecture and meticulously landscaped grounds projected an image of academic superiority and exclusivity that had defined the prestigious boarding school for over 150 years. Wrought iron gates bearing the school's emblem, a soaring eagle clutching a quill, guarded the entrance, along with the Latin motto Excellentia Sine Excusatione, excellence without excuse. For generations, Westmont had educated the children of political dynasties, tech billionaires, and old money families, a point that Principal Victoria Harrington emphasized during her carefully orchestrated tours for prospective parents. At 52, with platinum blonde hair, always perfectly styled and perpetually arched eyebrows, Principal Harrington had overseen Westmont's ascension to unparalleled elite status during her decade-long tenure. This achievement came largely from her ruthless selectivity about which families were deemed Westmont material. October sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her marble-accented office, illuminating walls adorned with framed photographs of Principal Harrington alongside famous alumni, certificates from prestigious educational associations, and an oil painting of the school's founder, Thaddeus Westmont. The antique grandfather clock in the corner ticked rhythmically, marking time for her 2 p.m. disciplinary meeting, one she had been anticipating since the incident in the advanced genomics laboratory the previous day. Principal Harrington adjusted her signature pearl necklace as her assistant, Ms. Chambers, knocked briskly before opening the ornate mahogany door. "The Harmons are here, ma'am," she announced, her voice carrying a hint of discomfort. "Send them in," she replied, with a thin smile that never reached her eyes, adding, "and perhaps have maintenance on standby. I suspect there might be soil or plant debris." Robert Harmon entered first, his broad shoulders and weathered hands making the opulent office feel suddenly smaller. Despite his obvious attempt to dress appropriately in a clean button-down shirt and his best jeans, Principal Harrington immediately noted the man's sun-weathered face, soil-stained fingernails, and the slight awkwardness with which he carried himself in such formal surroundings. Behind him came his daughter, Olivia Harmon, a poised 17-year-old with intense hazel eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore the Westmont uniform, navy blazer with embroidered crest, pleated skirt, and white Oxford shirt, though without the affected confidence many of her classmates had perfected. While her clothing matched her peers, there was something undeniably different about her bearing, a quiet self-assurance that seemed rooted in something beyond these privileged halls. "Good afternoon," Principal Harrington said, remaining seated, as she gestured to the leather chairs across from her imposing glass desk. "Please make yourselves comfortable." Robert Harmon sat with the careful movements of someone unused to such luxurious furnishings. "Thank you for seeing us, Principal Harrington. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss what happened yesterday." "Ah, yes," the principal interrupted, reaching for a folder with Olivia's name on it. "Let's get right to it, shall we? My schedule is quite full today." She made a show of flipping through the pages, though she had already reviewed the incident, report thoroughly, and made her decision hours ago. Olivia sat quietly beside her father, her expression composed but watchful, as the principal began her assessment. "Mr. Harmon, Principal Harrington said, directing her words to Olivia while occasionally glancing at Robert. Yesterday's incident in the Advanced Genomics Laboratory was a serious violation of Westmont's Code of Conduct. Unauthorized experimentation and modification of school research protocols are strictly prohibited, as clearly stated in the handbook, that all students and parents sign upon admission. Robert Harmon leaned forward slightly. "Ma'am, if I may, my daughter was helping another student who was struggling with their research project. From what Olivia told me, and what several classmates have confirmed, she was simply correcting a critical error in the experimental design that would have invalidated the entire project." Principal Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Harmon, at Westmont Academy, we have proper channels for academic assistance. If your daughter observed a fellow student having difficulties, she should have directed them to our science faculty or the STEM Resource Center, rather than taking matters into her own hands." "There wasn't time," Olivia spoke up, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "The International Youth Science Congress submission deadline is tomorrow, and the team was in a panic because their plant hybridization experiment was failing. Dr. Maxwell had already left for a conference, and the substitute instructor didn't understand the advanced genetic modification techniques." "Yes, the genetics research team," Principal Harrington said, her tone shifting subtly. "Led by Madison Pierce, daughter of Senator Pierce, one of our most distinguished alumni and major donors. I've spoken with Madison as well, and she claims she merely observed while your daughter entirely restructured their research methodology without authorization. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Robert Harmon's weathered face reddened slightly. "With all due respect, ma'am, that's not the complete truth. Several students have confirmed that Madison specifically asked Olivia for help because of her expertise with plant genomics. Olivia didn't act unilaterally." Principal Harrington's perfectly manicured fingers tapped lightly on the folder. "I have taken those accounts into consideration, Mr. Harmon. Madison will receive appropriate guidance for her role in this matter. However, Miss Harmon," she looked pointedly at Olivia, "your response was concerning and reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how academic matters are handled at an institution of Westmont's caliber." Olivia maintained eye contact with the principal. "I was simply applying fundamental genetic principles to correct the experimental design. I didn't permanently alter any equipment. I just recalibrated the crossbreeding protocols and adjusted the gene expression markers to achieve viable hybridization. According to Madison, you suggested that the team's original methodology was, and I quote, fundamentally flawed and would never produce viable results." Principal Harrington countered. "I said the current approach violated basic genetic compatibility principles," Olivia clarified. "The way they had designed the gene splicing would create an insurmountable immune response that would kill the hybrid seedlings within 48 hours. Principal Harrington leaned back in her leather chair. "Regardless, this incident raises larger concerns about your fit within the Westmont community. Your academic performance, while notable, doesn't fully compensate for this sort of independent approach to institutional protocols." The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the moment of tense silence that followed. Robert Harmon's hands gripped the armrests of his chair, knuckles whitening slightly. "What exactly are you suggesting, Principal Harrington?" he asked quietly. The principal's tone became one of practiced regret. "I believe expulsion is warranted, effective immediately. The disciplinary committee and I have evaluated whether Olivia's continued enrollment at Westmont is in everyone's best interest, and we've determined it is not." "Expulsion?" Robert's voice rose slightly. "For helping another student fix a science project? What about Madison Pierce?" "As I mentioned, Madison will receive appropriate guidance," Principal Harrington replied smoothly. A mandatory study session to improve her understanding of scientific principles. A study session versus expulsion, Robert said, disbelief evident in his tone. That hardly seems equitable. Equity, Mr. Harmon, must take into account the totality of circumstances, Principal Harrington replied, her condescension barely concealed. Madison comes from a family with a long Westmont legacy. Her momentary lapse in judgment must be weighed against her family's contributions to this institution and her otherwise exemplary record. Olivia, who had remained composed throughout the exchange, finally spoke. So it's not really about what happened in the lab. It's about who my family is or isn't. Principal Harrington's smile tightened. I've made my decision based on a holistic review. The expulsion is effective immediately. You may gather your essential belongings from your dormitory, and we'll arrange for the rest to be shipped to your farm. She stood abruptly, signaling the end of the meeting. Ms. Chambers will provide the necessary paperwork on your way. Out. Robert Harmon rose slowly, his expression a careful mask. Principal Harrington, my daughter, earned her place at this school. Her scholarship was based on merit, not family connections. Yes, the Rural Excellence Scholarship Program, Principal Harrington replied with a dismissive wave. A commendable initiative, though perhaps we need to reconsider the adaptation period necessary for students from such different backgrounds. The cultural adjustment to Westmont can be challenging for those unaccustomed to our traditions. Olivia stood beside her father, her posture straight, despite the clear dismissal. Thank you for your time, Principal Harrington, she said with remarkable composure. I'll collect my things. As they turned to leave, Principal Harrington added, Mr. Harmon, I suggest using this opportunity to consider whether Olivia might be better served at an institution more aligned with her rural sensibilities. Perhaps the agricultural high school in your district would be more suitable. Robert paused at the door, looking back at the principal. When my wife returns from Washington next week, we'll discuss all options as a family. Principal Harrington gave a dismissive nod. Yes, your wife works for the government, I recall. Some sort of administrative role. Well, I'm sure she'll understand the importance of finding the right fit for Olivia's particular background. As the door closed behind the Harmons, Principal Harrington returned to her desk with a satisfied sigh, another problem nearly resolved. The scholarship program had been the board's idea, good for public relations and tax benefits, but integrating students from such ordinary backgrounds often proved problematic. Better to redirect them early rather than allow them to disrupt. Westmont's carefully cultivated environment, her intercom buzzed. Principal Harrington, Senator Pierce is on line 1. Perfect timing. She would assure the senator that the situation had been handled appropriately, with minimal consequences for Madison. After all, maintaining relationships with families like the Pierces was essential to Westmont's continued prominence. Senator, thank you for calling, she said warmly into the receiver. I've just finished meeting with the Harmon girl and her father. Rest assured, the matter has been addressed decisively. Outside in the parking lot, Robert held the door of his well-maintained pickup truck for his daughter. The truck, while meticulously cared for, was at least 10 years old, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicles filling the visitor spaces. As Olivia climbed in, Robert noticed his daughter's rigid posture. The only visible sign of her contained emotions. I'm sorry, Dad, Olivia said quietly as Robert started the engine. For what? Helping someone who needed it? Robert shook his head. I'm proud of you, Olivia. But my scholarship, all our sacrifices to get me here. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Robert interrupted gently. We'll talk with your mom when she calls tonight. Nothing's decided yet. As they drove away from Westmont Academy, Olivia watched the imposing buildings recede in the side mirror. The opportunity to attend had seemed like a dream come true. When she'd earned the full academic scholarship last spring, a chance at the kind of education and connections that could open doors far beyond their small farming community in Riverdale Valley. She'd already made up her mind before we walked in, Olivia said finally, breaking the silence. It didn't matter what I said. She sees what she wants to see. Robert gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. People like Harrington see what they expect to see, makes their world simpler. They drove in thoughtful silence as the manicured suburbs gave way to rolling countryside. Fields of organic crops stretched out on either side of the highway, ready for the fall harvest. After about 40 minutes, Robert turned onto a gravel road that led to their property, 75 acres of sustainable farmland that had been in the Harmon family for 4 generations. Their house was modest but well-maintained, a 2-story farmhouse with a wide front porch surrounded by gardens bursting with native plants. Behind it stood a large modern greenhouse and several outbuildings, including a workshop where Olivia had built her first hydroponic system at the age of 13. It wasn't grand like Westmont, but it was home, a place where innovation and character mattered more than pedigree. As they pulled into the driveway, Robert noticed Olivia checking her phone. "Everything okay?" Olivia nodded. "Just a text from Chen. He wanted to thank me for helping with the gene splicing yesterday and to apologize about what happened. Says a bunch of students are petitioning against my expulsion." "That's something at least," Robert said as they walked toward the house. "Sounds like you made some real friends there, despite everything." Inside, the house was comfortable and lived in. Family photographs lined the walls, many featuring a woman in professional attire alongside Robert and Olivia at various ages. The refrigerator door displayed Olivia's academic achievements and a recent letter with an official government seal at the top. "Your mom's going to call around 8 tonight," Robert said, checking his watch. "That gives us a few hours to figure out how we want to approach this." Olivia set her backpack down. "What if it's really over, Dad? All the work to get that scholarship, there for nothing." Robert placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Listen to me, Olivia. Your worth isn't determined by whether some stuck-up principal thinks you belong in her school. Whatever happens with Westmont, we'll figure it out together." Olivia nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "I should go check on my experiments." As Olivia headed toward the greenhouse, Robert moved to the kitchen window, looking out over their land. The fall harvest was in full swing, fields ready for gathering. He thought about his wife, Catherine Harmon, currently working in Washington, D.C. in what their daughter believed was a mid-level government position. Catherine had risen through government ranks through sheer determination and brilliance, earning respect in a system that hadn't always welcomed women from rural backgrounds. She would know how to handle this situation. She understood institutions and power dynamics in ways Robert never had. He glanced at the calendar on the wall. She was due home on leave in just 5 days. Principal Harrington had no idea who she was really dealing with. In the state-of-the-art greenhouse behind the house, Olivia stood amidst rows of experimental plant hybrids, each carefully labeled and monitored. This space had always been her sanctuary, a place where the complex rules of genetics and botany were more comprehensible than the arbitrary social hierarchies of places like Westmont. She picked up a tablet, checking the growth data on her latest experiment, a drought-resistant wheat variety that had won the National Youth Agricultural Innovation Award last year. The achievement that had helped her secure the Westmont scholarship. The irony wasn't lost on her that the very skills that had earned her entry to the school were now the reason for her expulsion. Her phone buzzed with an incoming message. Expecting more texts from classmates, she was surprised to see it was from Dr. Eleanor Jensen, her mentor from the summer biogenetics program at State University. Heard about what happened at Westmont? Their loss if they can't recognize exceptional talent. The Agricultural Innovation Lab, where I consult, might be interested in your hybridization techniques. Call me if you want to discuss options. Olivia stared at the message, conflicted. Part of her wanted to respond immediately, to grasp at this unexpected opportunity, but another part felt a deep sense of injustice that couldn't be so easily set aside. Westmont had accepted her based on merit, had promised her an education that could launch her toward her dreams, and now they were ready to discard her because she didn't fit their preconceived notions of who belonged. Later that evening, as promised, Catherine's video call came through. Despite being in a secure government facility in Washington, her image showed a woman of commanding presence. At 45, Catherine Harmon's dark hair was styled in a professional bob, and though she wore a conservative suit, there was nothing standard about the intelligence in her eyes or the authority in her bearing. "Hey, you two," she said warmly, her face lighting up at the sight of her husband and daughter. "How's everything back home?" Robert and Olivia exchanged glances. "Actually, Mom, there's something we need to tell you," Olivia began, proceeding to explain the entire situation. The incident with the genetics team, the meeting with Principal Harrington, and the expulsion. Catherine listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly serious. When Olivia finished, she was silent for a moment, her professional training evident in her measured response. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," she said finally. "You assisted the research team with fixing a critical design flaw after being specifically asked for help. You use proper scientific principles, and for this, you've been expelled, while the team leader, who happens to be a senator's daughter, received mandatory study hall." "That's about it," Robert confirmed. "Principal Harrington made it pretty clear that the issue wasn't really what Olivia did. It was more about who she is, or rather, who she isn't." Catherine's expression hardened slightly. "I see." "I'm sorry, Mom," Olivia said. "I know how hard you and Dad worked to help me get that scholarship." "Olivia, look at me," Catherine said firmly. "You have nothing to apologize for. You showed initiative and problem-solving skills by helping peers who needed assistance. That's exactly what your father and I have taught you." Robert nodded in agreement. "That's what I told her." "As for Principal Harrington," Catherine continued, her tone shifting subtly, "it sounds like she needs a refresher course in leadership, ethical decision-making, and the consequences of discrimination." There was something in her voice that made both Robert and Olivia straighten slightly. "What are you thinking?" Robert asked, recognizing his wife's strategic expression. "I'm thinking it's fortunate that I was already planning to fly home tomorrow," Catherine replied. "Change of schedule came through this morning. I was going to surprise you both." Olivia's face brightened. "Really? You're coming home early?" Catherine nodded. "And I think my first stop will be Westmont Academy. Principal Harrington and I need to have a conversation about values, leadership, and the true meaning of excellence." "Catherine," Robert said cautiously, "what exactly are you planning?" A smile played at the corner of her mouth. "Let's just say Principal Harrington has no idea who she's dealing with, and it's time she learned." "Mom," Olivia said, leaning forward, "I don't want special treatment just because you're important in Washington. That would make me no better than Madison using her father's position." Catherine's expression softened with pride. "That's a principled stance, Olivia, and I respect it. But this isn't about seeking special treatment for you. This is about addressing a pattern of institutional discrimination that affects many students from backgrounds like ours." She shifted slightly, her posture becoming more formal. "What I'm planning isn't just about your case. Your situation has brought to light issues that align with a presidential education equity initiative I've been developing with my team. This initiative addresses how children from rural families and public servants are treated in elite educational institutions. "So you're saying my expulsion might actually help other students?" Olivia asked, her quick mind grasping the strategic implications. "Exactly," Catherine nodded. "Sometimes it takes a specific case to illuminate systemic problems. Your situation provides a perfect example of the biases we're working to address." Robert looked at his wife with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're turning this into a test case for your initiative." "The timing is serendipitous," Catherine acknowledged. "Several key officials involved in the initiative are currently in the area for a conference. When I explained your situation, they agreed it merited immediate attention as part of our ongoing assessment of educational equity for rural families." The strategic brilliance of her approach wasn't lost on either Robert or Olivia. This wasn't about pulling rank or seeking special favors. It was about using a specific instance of injustice to drive broader institutional change. "So, what happens tomorrow?" Olivia asked, a new determination replacing the dejection she had felt earlier. "Tomorrow," Catherine replied, with the calm confidence of someone accustomed to navigating complex political situations. "Westmont Academy learns that actions have consequences beyond their gates, and that true excellence isn't determined by pedigree, but by principles." The following morning, Principal Harrington arrived at Westmont Academy earlier than usual. The meeting with the Harmons had been satisfyingly straightforward, and Senator Pierce had been appropriately grateful for the principal's handling of the situation. With any luck, they could redirect those scholarship funds to a more suitable candidate next term, perhaps the daughter of a prominent donor who had recently inquired about mid-year admission. As she entered the administrative building, Ms. Chambers approached with an unusual expression of concern. "Principal Harrington, there's been a rather unusual call," she said, her voice lower than normal. "Someone from the White House contacted the school regarding Olivia Harmon's expulsion." Principal Harrington stopped mid-stride. "The White House? That's absurd. Why would they involve themselves in a routine disciplinary matter?" "I'm not entirely sure, ma'am, but they specifically mentioned an official visit this morning to discuss, and I quote, equity in educational disciplinary practices as they relate to rural families." "Rural families," Principal Harrington repeated, baffled. "Oh, the mother works for the government in some administrative capacity. Probably some mid-level bureaucrat trying to throw around what little weight she has. Nothing to be concerned about." Miss Chambers hesitated. "Ma'am, they mentioned a delegation would be arriving by helicopter. They've requested permission to use the main quad as a landing zone." "Helicopter?" Principal Harrington scoffed. "This is getting ridiculous." "Deny the request, Ms. Chambers. Tell them to use proper channels through our legal department if they have concerns about school disciplinary policies." "I already tried, ma'am," Ms. Chambers replied, her discomfort growing. "The woman I spoke with, Dr. Reynolds, said the visit had been cleared through the Department of Education and the State Board of Education as part of a new presidential initiative regarding rural families' educational rights. She was quite insistent." Principal Harrington's confident expression faltered slightly. "The Department of Education? That can't be right." "There's more, ma'am," Ms. Chambers continued. "Chairman Donovan from the Board of Trustees called. Apparently he received a call from someone at the White House regarding today's visit. He's expecting your call immediately." Now Principal Harrington felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. The board chairman wouldn't be involved unless something significant was happening. "Very well, I'll call him right away. And Ms. Chambers, find out everything you can about Olivia Harmon's mother, her exact position, department, whatever you can discover." In her office, Principal Harrington dialed Chairman Donovan with fingers that weren't quite steady. "Victoria, The chairman's voice was unusually formal. "Would you care to explain why I received a call from the White House Chief of Staff regarding Westmont Academy this morning?" "I'm as confused as you are, sir," Principal Harrington replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "Apparently, it relates to a routine disciplinary matter involving a scholarship student, nothing that warranted outside involvement." "That's not how it was characterized to me," Chairman Donovan replied coolly. "I was informed that Westmont is being included in a high-profile assessment of educational equity for rural families, prompted by a case that potentially demonstrates discriminatory practices. The delegation arriving this morning includes several senior administration officials and an education policy advisor to the president." Principal Harrington felt the blood drain from her face. "Sir, there must be some mistake. The student in question, Olivia Harmon, was expelled for unauthorized experimentation. It was a straightforward disciplinary decision. Was Senator Pierce's daughter involved?" Chairman Donovan asked sharply. "Well, yes, but—" "And did Pierce's daughter receive equal consequences?" Principal Harrington faltered. "The circumstances were different, sir. The Pierce family has a long history with Westmont, and Madison's actions were less severe than—" "Victoria," Chairman Donovan interrupted, his voice hardening. "Do you have any idea who Catherine Harmon is?" "She works for the government, some sort of administrative position, I believe," Principal Harrington replied, increasingly uncomfortable. "Catherine Harmon is the special advisor to the president on rural development and agricultural innovation," Chairman Donovan said slowly. "She's one of the leading architects of the administration's rural revitalization strategy, has the ear of every cabinet secretary on matters of agricultural policy, is currently leading a multi-billion-dollar initiative that was featured in last week's presidential address, and she happens to serve on the President's Commission on Educational Excellence for All Americans." The chairman's words fell like stones in the suddenly silent office. I had no idea," Principal Harrington stammered. "Clearly," Chairman Donovan replied dryly. "And now, thanks to your handling of this situation, Westmont Academy is going to be the centerpiece of a federal review of discriminatory practices affecting rural students in private educational institutions. The delegation arriving this morning will include the Secretary of Education, along with Catherine Harmon herself, who is apparently returning from Washington specifically to address this matter." Principal Harrington sank into her chair. "What should I do?" "Fix this, Victoria," Chairman Donovan said firmly, "before that presidential helicopter lands on our quad. Because if this becomes a media spectacle, your position as principal will be the least of our concerns." When the call ended, Ms. Chambers entered with a tablet in hand, her expression grim. "Ma'am, I found some information about Catherine Harmon." She placed the tablet on the desk, displaying a White House press release with a photograph of a distinguished-looking woman standing beside the president in the Oval Office. The caption identified her as Catherine Harmon, Special Advisor to the President on Rural Development and Agricultural Innovation, and newly appointed Chair of the Presidential Commission on Educational Excellence for All Americans. "There's more, ma'am," Ms. Chambers continued, scrolling to another article. "She has a master's degree from Harvard and a PhD in agricultural economics from Cornell. Before her current position, she served as the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture and led the President's Rural Prosperity Task Force." Principal Harrington stared at the image, the magnitude of her miscalculation becoming painfully clear. This was not some low-ranking bureaucrat she could dismiss. This was someone with direct access to the president, connections throughout the highest levels of government, and apparently the motivation to use both. "And ma'am," Ms. Chambers added hesitantly, The Harmon family has just been informed that their appeal has been expedited for review by the state's Department of Education with a special dispensation from the governor's office. Principal Harrington looked up sharply. "That's impossible. Those appeals take months to process." "Not in this case, apparently," Ms. Chambers replied. "The email came directly from the Education Commissioner's office." For several long moments, Principal Harrington sat in stunned silence, the grandfather clocks ticking suddenly deafening in the quiet office. The carefully constructed world over which she had presided was suddenly tilting on its axis, all because she had dismissed a farmer's daughter without considering who her mother might be. "Get Robert Harmon on the phone," she finally said, her voice not entirely steady, "and clear my schedule for the day. I need to speak with Senator Pierce as well." As Ms. Chambers left to make the calls, Principal Harrington stared at Catherine Harmon's image on the tablet. "You're just a farmer's wife," she had thought dismissively. She could not have been more catastrophically wrong. The wheels were already in motion, and in less than 2 hours, a presidential helicopter would land at Westmont Academy. Principal Harrington had less than a morning to prevent what could become the most spectacular downfall in the school's distinguished history and her own career. Robert Harmon's pickup truck rumbled along the winding country road leading back to their farm. The morning sun bathed the autumn landscape in golden light, but neither he nor Olivia could appreciate the beauty surrounding them. The weight of what had just happened at Westmont Academy hung heavy in the air between them. "You know," Robert finally said, breaking the silence, "your grandmother faced something similar when she first proposed organic farming methods to the County Agricultural Board. The chairman didn't think a woman without formal agricultural training could manage a sophisticated organic operation. 2 years later, our farm had the highest yield with the lowest environmental impact in the state." Olivia glanced at her. "Your father. What did Grandma do to change their minds?" "She didn't focus on changing their minds," Robert replied thoughtfully. "She focused on proving them wrong through her actions. Success is the most eloquent response to doubt." These words resonated with Olivia as they pulled onto the gravel driveway of their homestead. The 75-acre Harmon farm spread out before them, rows of carefully tended organic crops, the modern greenhouse gleaming in the sunlight, and the modest 2-story farmhouse that had sheltered 4 generations of their family. As they stepped onto the porch, Olivia's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from the Westmont Academy genetics team's group chat. "Hybridization failing. Again. Without Olivia's modifications, we're back to square one. Submission deadline tomorrow. Anyone have ideas?" Several responses followed. "This is so unfair. Olivia fixed it perfectly." "Madison keeps insisting her approach is correct. Won't listen to reason. Should we withdraw from the competition in protest?" Olivia showed the messages to her father, who raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Looks like your classmates have more integrity than their principal," Robert observed. "What are you going to do?" Olivia stared at her phone, conflicted. "I want to help them. It's not the team's fault that Madison and Principal Harrington are playing politics, but if I get involved again, sometimes standing on the sidelines hurts more than taking a risk," Robert said, unlocking the front door. "But whatever you decide, I'll support you." Inside, the house felt unusually quiet without Catherine's presence. Though her work kept her in Washington for weeks at a time, her influence permeated every corner of their home, from the meticulously organized home office to the framed articles about her work in agricultural policy that lined the hallway. Olivia wandered into her mother's study, drawn to the wall of family photographs. Her eyes lingered on one taken 2 years ago at her mother's appointment ceremony. Catherine Harmon stood proud in the East Room of the White House, her hand resting on 15-year-old Olivia's shoulder. Even then, before Westmont, before the scholarship, there had been a quiet determination in her eyes that mirrored her mother's. "She always said you inherited her stubborn streak," Robert remarked, joining Olivia in the study, "and my hands-on approach to problem-solving." "What would Mom do in this situation?" Olivia asked, tracing the outline of her mother's image. With her finger, Robert considered this question carefully. "Your mother believes that systems only change when someone has the courage to challenge them. But she also believes in strategic thinking, not just reacting emotionally, but planning several moves ahead." This insight sparked something in Olivia. She'd been thinking about her situation as an individual injustice, but perhaps there was a larger opportunity here, a chance to address the systemic inequities at Westmont that affected other scholarship students and rural kids. "Dad," she said, a new determination entering her voice, "I need to use the greenhouse lab. There's something I need to develop." Robert recognized the look in his daughter's eyes, the same focused expression that appeared whenever Olivia was formulating a complex solution to a challenging problem. "The lab's all yours," he replied. "I'll be here if you need me." In the state-of-the-art greenhouse laboratory that her mother had helped fund through a rural innovation grant, tools of all kinds lined the walls, from traditional gardening implements to advanced genetic sequencing equipment. A large digital whiteboard covered one wall filled with molecular formulas and genetic sequences. This space had been Olivia's sanctuary long before Westmont Academy entered their lives, the place where her natural talents had blossomed without judgment or artificial constraints. For the next several hours, Olivia worked with intense concentration, refining the plant hybridization protocol she had developed the previous day. But instead of simply recreating what she had done, she was documenting every step of her process, creating detailed instructions and explanatory notes that could be followed by someone with basic genetics knowledge. By late afternoon, she had produced not only a working protocol, but also a comprehensive instructional guide. She photographed the completed work and sent the images along with the documentation to Wei Chen, one of the few Westmont students who had consistently treated her as an equal, regardless of her background. The accompanying message was simple. This isn't just about winning a competition. It's about standing up for what's right. Use it if you think it will help. Meanwhile, across town at Westmont Academy, Principal Victoria Harrington was experiencing the most stressful morning of her professional career. The carefully constructed facade of confidence she had maintained for 10 years was crumbling as reports continued to flow in about the impending visit from Catherine Harmon and the White House delegation. Ms. Chambers entered her office for what felt like the 20th time that day, each visit bringing more concerning news. "Ma'am, we've received confirmation that the presidential helicopter has been cleared for landing on our main quad at 11 a.m. The Department of Education has authorized it as part of the Rural Education Equity Initiative assessment." Principal Harrington's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "This is completely unprecedented. Surely there are protocols, proper channels." "There's more," Ms. Chambers continued, her usual composure noticeably strained. "Several news outlets have received press releases about the initiative. They're sending reporters to cover the administration's visit." "Press?" Principal Harrington nearly choked. "Who authorized press on campus?" "The Department of Education. Ma'am, they're framing it as a positive story about educational equity for rural students." The principal collapsed back into her chair, the magnitude of the situation finally sinking in. "And have you reached Robert Harmon?" "Yes, ma'am. He said he would relay your request for a meeting to Olivia, but that any discussions would need to include Catherine Harmon, who is arriving today." Just then, the phone on her desk rang. Principal Harrington answered it with visible reluctance. "Victoria, it's Donovan," came the voice of the board chairman. "Senator Pierce is requesting an emergency meeting with both of us this morning. It seems his daughter Madison has made some revelations about yesterday's incident that differ significantly from her initial account." Principal Harrington closed her eyes in despair. What kind of revelations? Apparently, Madison has admitted that she specifically sought out Olivia Harmon's help because of her expertise with plant genomics. She also acknowledged that Olivia's modifications were essential for the team's success, and that she misrepresented the situation out of fear of appearing incompetent. Why would she suddenly come clean? Principal Harrington asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. It seems several members of the genetics research team confronted her with their intention to withdraw from tomorrow's competition unless the truth was acknowledged. They're quite adamant that Olivia's expulsion was unjustified. The chairman's voice hardened. "Victoria, this situation has spiraled far beyond a simple disciplinary matter. We have a White House delegation arriving in less than 2 hours, media coverage arranged by the Department of Education, and now evidence that your decision was based on false information. The board expects you to find a solution that minimizes damage to Westmont's reputation immediately." As the call ended, Principal Harrington stared blankly at the oil painting of Thaddeus Westmont that hung behind her desk. The school's founder had established Westmont Academy with the mission of developing young leaders of integrity and intellect. Somewhere along the way, Principal Harrington realized she had allowed integrity to become secondary to influence, intellect to become less important than affluence. The truth was an uncomfortable weight pressing down on her. She had misjudged Olivia Harmon from the moment the girl arrived at Westmont, seeing only a farmer's daughter rather than a brilliant young mind deserving of respect. Back at the Harmon farm, as mid-morning approached, the sound of tires on gravel caught Robert's attention. He looked out the kitchen window, expecting to see Principal Harrington, or perhaps a representative from Westmont. Instead, a sleek black SUV with government plates pulled up to the house. The driver's door opened, and a woman in a professional suit emerged. Even at a distance, her commanding presence was unmistakable. "Catherine," Robert whispered, dropping the dish towel and rushing toward the door. Catherine Harmon stood on her family's porch, her professional demeanor momentarily giving way to a broad smile as her husband appeared in the doorway. Despite 20 hours of travel from Washington, she looked alert and focused, her dark hair perfectly styled, her outfit impeccable. "You're really here," Robert said, embracing her tightly. "When you said you were coming home today, I half expected something would change." "Nothing was going to keep me away once I heard what happened," Catherine replied, returning his embrace before pulling back to look at him. "Where's Olivia?" "In the greenhouse lab. She's been there all morning working on something related to the genetics project." Catherine nodded approvingly. "That's my daughter, facing challenges head-on rather than backing down." As Robert picked up her briefcase, he noticed a second vehicle pulling up behind the SUV, a government car with 2 suited individuals inside. "Part of your delegation?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Dr. Reynolds and Dr. Garcia," Catherine confirmed. "They're key members of the President's Educational Equity Commission. We have some preparations to make for today, but first, I need to see our daughter." In the greenhouse laboratory, Olivia was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps. She was adding final touches to a presentation document that explained both the technical aspects of her hybridization techniques and the educational principles involved. "You always did lose track of time when you were solving a problem," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Olivia's head snapped up, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Mom!" In 3 quick strides, she crossed the laboratory and was enveloped in her mother's embrace. For a moment, she was no longer a Westmont Academy student or a brilliant young geneticist, but simply a 17-year-old girl who had missed her mother desperately. "I didn't think you'd be home until later," she said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "Some things couldn't wait," Catherine replied, stepping back to look at her properly. "I'm sorry about what happened at Westmont, Olivia, but I'm incredibly proud of how you've handled it." She glanced at the laboratory workstation, taking in the plant specimens and the extensive documentation surrounding them. "What's all this?" "Plan B," Olivia explained, gathering her composure. "The genetics team is still struggling with the hybridization issue. I've created comprehensive instructions so they can implement the solution themselves without technically involving me. We're going to introduce it as a collective team effort." Catherine studied the materials, impressed by both the technical sophistication and the clarity of the explanations. "You found a way to help them succeed while respecting the rules. That shows true leadership, Olivia." Her daughter's expression turned serious. "Dad said you're planning some kind of intervention at Westmont today. I appreciate you standing up for me, but I don't want special treatment just because you're Special Advisor Harmon." "That's not what this is about," Catherine assured her, pulling up a stool and indicating for Olivia to sit beside her. "Your situation has highlighted an issue that's been on our radar for some time: how children from rural backgrounds and scholarship students are treated in elite educational institutions." She activated a tablet she had brought with her, displaying a document titled Rural Education Equity Initiative. "This initiative has been in development for months. We've documented patterns of discrimination against rural students and scholarship recipients across multiple prestigious schools. Your experience at Westmont isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a systemic problem that needs addressing." Olivia reviewed the document with growing understanding. "So you're using my case as an example?" "With your permission," Catherine nodded. "Your situation presents a perfect illustration of the issues we're targeting: disparate disciplinary standards based on family background, failure to recognize the unique skills that students from non-traditional backgrounds bring to these institutions, and the lack of support systems for students whose family dynamics differ from the assumed norm." For the first time since her expulsion, Olivia felt a sense of purpose replacing her frustration. This wasn't just about her getting fair treatment. It was about creating change that could benefit countless students facing similar bias. "What exactly will happen today?" she asked, her analytical mind already processing possibilities and outcomes. "A delegation from the President's Educational Equity Commission will conduct an official assessment of Westmont's policies and practices," Catherine explained. "This will include reviewing your case, but also examining broader patterns in how the school handles disciplinary matters, supports diverse students, and addresses equity concerns." She smiled slightly. "The presidential helicopter is partly optics, partly logistics. We need to transport the full delegation, and yes, I'll admit the dramatic entrance serves a strategic purpose. Sometimes institutions need a wake-up call before they're willing to engage in meaningful change." "And Principal Harrington?" Olivia asked, thinking of the principal's dismissive attitude. "Principal Harrington will have an opportunity to demonstrate whether she's capable of growth and adaptation," Catherine replied diplomatically. "How she responds will determine her future at Westmont far more than any action we might take." As they talked, Robert appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but Principal Harrington has called 5 times in the last hour. She's requesting an urgent meeting with all of us this morning." Catherine and Olivia exchanged knowing glances. "It seems the principal is experiencing a change of heart," Catherine observed dryly. "What do you think, Olivia? Should we meet with her now or let her wait until our official visit?" Olivia considered the question seriously. Part of her wanted Principal Harrington to sweat, to experience even a fraction of the anxiety she had felt when her future at Westmont was threatened, but another part recognized that true leadership meant rising above petty retribution. We should meet with her, she decided finally, not for her sake, but because it's the right thing to do. If there's an opportunity to resolve this constructively before it becomes a public spectacle, we should take it. Catherine's expression filled with pride. That's a mature decision, and a strategic one. It gives us the moral high ground while still maintaining leverage. As they prepared to leave for Westmont, Dr. Reynolds approached with an update. Special Advisor Harmon, we've received word that Senator Pierce and his daughter are also requesting to be present at this meeting. Apparently, Madison has come forward with the full story about the genetics incident. This news surprised all three Harmons. Madison Pierce had been the catalyst for Olivia's expulsion, her misrepresentation of events providing Principal Harrington with the pretext needed to enforce her biased disciplinary action. Should we allow it? Robert asked, looking to his wife and daughter. Olivia nodded firmly. Yes. If Madison is ready to tell the truth, she deserves the chance. This isn't about punishing her. It's about creating accountability and moving forward constructively. The drive to Westmont Academy. That morning was markedly different from the tense journey Olivia and Robert had made the previous day. With Catherine in the passenger seat of Robert's pickup truck and the government vehicles following behind, there was a sense of balanced power that had been absent during their earlier visit. Westmont's campus was buzzing with unusual activity. As they arrived, with maintenance staff hastily preparing the main quad and security personnel conferring in small groups. The administration building, however, was unusually quiet, its stately facade now seeming less imposing and more like a stage set awaiting the final act of a dramatic production. Ms. Chambers met them at the entrance, her usual composure noticeably strained. Special Advisor Harmon, she greeted Catherine with a respectful nod. Principal Harrington is waiting in the conference room with Chairman Donovan, Senator Pierce, and Madison. As they followed her through the hallways, Olivia noticed subtle changes in how she was perceived. Staff members who had previously looked through her now watched with undisguised curiosity. Even Miss Chambers, who had always been politely distant, treated her with a new respect that went beyond her mother's position. The conference room door opened to reveal a tableau that would have been unimaginable just hours earlier. Principal Harrington sat at the head of the table, her usually imperious demeanor replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Chairman Donovan occupied the chair to her right, his expression gravely concerned. Senator Pierce, a distinguished man in his early 60s, sat opposite with Madison beside him, the teenager looking uncharacteristically subdued. Special Advisor Harmon, Chairman Donovan rose to greet them. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I believe we have much to discuss regarding recent events. Catherine, now fully in her professional mode, nodded curtly. Indeed we do, Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity for dialogue before today's official assessment. The subtle emphasis on official assessment sent a visible ripple of discomfort through Principal Harrington. She cleared her throat nervously. Special Advisor Harmon, Mr. Harmon, Olivia, she began, forcing herself to make eye contact with each of them. I want to express my sincere regret for how this situation has been handled. It appears there were misunderstandings about the events in the genetics laboratory. Madison Pierce straightened in her chair. It wasn't a misunderstanding, she said, her voice quiet but clear. I lied about what happened. Olivia didn't experiment without permission. I specifically asked for her help because our design wasn't working. When my father heard I was having trouble with the project, I panicked and made it sound like Olivia had interfered rather than helped. Senator Pierce placed a steadying hand on his daughter's shoulder. Madison came to me with the full story this morning after several team members threatened to withdraw from tomorrow's competition in protest of Olivia's expulsion. As difficult as this is, I believe in accountability, including for my daughter. The senator turned to face the Harmons directly. Special Advisor Mr. Harmon, Olivia, I offer my sincere apologies for my daughter's role in this situation. Her actions were wrong, and she understands there will be consequences. This unexpected accountability from the Pierces shifted the energy in the room. What had been positioned as a confrontation was evolving into something more constructive, an opportunity for genuine resolution rather than mere damage control. Principal Harrington, sensing the changing dynamics, attempted to regain control of the narrative. In light of this new information, I've decided to immediately rescind Olivia's expulsion and remove any mention of disciplinary action from her. Record, we at Westmont value truth and integrity above all else. The statement was so at odds with her earlier behavior that Olivia had to suppress a disbelieving laugh. But it was Catherine who responded, her diplomatic training evident in her measured tone. Principal Harrington, while I appreciate the gesture, I think we need to address the underlying issues that allowed this situation to develop in the first place. Olivia's experience points to concerning patterns in how Westmont handles disciplinary matters, particularly when they involve scholarship students or children from rural families. She placed a folder on the table containing the Rural Education Equity Initiative documentation. Our commission has been tracking similar cases across multiple institutions. The disparities in how students are treated based on family background, financial status, or parental occupation represent a significant equity concern. Chairman Donovan reached for the folder, reviewing its contents with growing solemnity. These findings are troubling, Special Advisor. I can assure you that such disparities do not align with Westmont's founding principles. And yet they persist, Catherine countered. Today's assessment will provide Westmont with an opportunity to demonstrate its commitment to addressing these issues constructively. We're not interested in punitive measures. Our goal is to help institutions develop more equitable practices that benefit all students. Principal Harrington, realizing that simply rescinding Olivia's expulsion would not be sufficient to avert today's very public examination of her leadership, attempted a new approach. Perhaps, she suggested, her voice strained with false enthusiasm, Westmont could serve as a pilot school for your initiative. We could implement new protocols for disciplinary review, create support systems for rural students, perhaps even establish a special scholarship fund. The transparent attempt to convert crisis into opportunity was not lost on anyone in the room. But Catherine recognized that self-interest could still serve a greater good if properly channeled. That possibility exists, she acknowledged, but it would require genuine commitment to institutional change, not just cosmetic adjustments to avoid negative publicity. Throughout this exchange, Olivia had remained silent, observing the dynamics with keen attention. Now, sensing a moment to contribute meaningfully, she spoke up. "If I may," she said, addressing the entire group. "What happened to me isn't important in isolation. What matters is ensuring that other students don't face similar discrimination. I came to Westmont because I believed it represented excellence in education. That should mean excellence for everyone, not just those from certain backgrounds." Her words, delivered without rancor but with clear conviction, resonated with unexpected power. Here was a 17-year-old displaying more wisdom and perspective than many of the adults in the room, demonstrating precisely why she deserved her place at Westmont, regardless of her background. Chairman Donovan turned to Olivia with newfound respect. Well said, young lady. And what would you consider an appropriate resolution to this situation? Olivia considered the question carefully before responding. 3 things. First, transparency. Westmont should publicly acknowledge the biases that have influenced disciplinary decisions and commit to addressing them. Second, structural change. Create systems that ensure all students are treated equitably, regardless of their family background. Third, accountability. Not punishment for Principal Harrington or Madison, but a genuine commitment to growth and learning from this experience. The room fell silent as the wisdom of Olivia's proposal sank in. It was neither vindictive nor naive, but a thoughtful blueprint for meaningful change. Senator Pierce was the first to respond. I support these suggestions wholeheartedly, and I'd like to add that my daughter will face appropriate consequences for her actions, not punitive measures, but opportunities to demonstrate growth through community service and ethical leadership training. Madison nodded in agreement, meeting Olivia's eyes for the first time with genuine remorse. I'm sorry, Olivia. I was wrong, and I'm ready to make amends however I can. Chairman Donovan turned to Principal Harrington. Victoria, I believe the board would view these proposals favorably. What's your position? Trapped between her instinct for self-preservation and the undeniable wisdom of Olivia's approach, Principal Harrington hesitated. In that moment of indecision, her true character was revealed more clearly than any words could express. She began, then stopped, visibly struggling with the choice before her. The room waited, the silence stretching uncomfortably as the principal confronted the crossroads of her professional life. Would she choose growth and change, however difficult, or cling to the familiar patterns that had brought her to this precarious position? The answer would determine not just her own future, but the trajectory of Westmont Academy and the hundreds of students whose lives were shaped by its culture and values. Principal Harrington stared at the assembled group in the conference room, the weight of her choice pressing down on her like a physical force. In this moment of truth, something unexpected happened. A memory surfaced from her own past. When I was your age, she said slowly, addressing Olivia directly, I was also a scholarship student. The revelation created a ripple of surprise through the room. This was not common knowledge at Westmont. My father was a factory worker, my mother a waitress. I hid that fact for decades, cultivated the right accent, the right connections. Her voice grew quieter. Somewhere along the way, I became what I once resented, someone who judged others based on background rather than merit. She straightened her shoulders, making a visible effort to reclaim her dignity. I accept your proposal, Miss Harmon. Westmont Academy will implement all 3 of your suggested reforms beginning immediately, and I will personally lead the effort to examine and rectify our institutional biases. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't merely a strategic retreat, but a genuine moment of self-reflection. Chairman Donovan nodded approvingly. I believe the board will fully support these changes. And Special Advisor Harmon, would these measures satisfy the requirements of your Rural Education Equity Initiative? Catherine considered this thoughtfully. They would represent an excellent starting point. If Westmont is serious about becoming a model for educational equity, we would be prepared to work collaboratively rather than adversarially toward that goal. Then perhaps, Senator Pierce suggested, today's visit could be reframed as the launch of a positive partnership rather than an investigation, a joint announcement of Westmont's commitment to leading educational reform. This elegant solution offered everyone a path forward that preserved dignity while still ensuring accountability. The tension in the room visibly dissipated as a constructive resolution took shape. I think that would be appropriate, Catherine agreed, provided that the commitments made today are formalized and transparent. As the adults worked out the details of the agreement, Olivia found herself face to face with Madison Pierce. I really am sorry, Madison said quietly. I was jealous of how easily you solved problems that stumped me, even though I've had every advantage. It was easier to tear you down than to admit I needed help. Olivia studied the other girl thoughtfully. Genetics has taught me that failure is just information. It tells you what doesn't work, so you can find what does. Maybe you should try looking at this situation the same way. Madison considered this perspective with genuine interest. I've never thought about it like that. Does that apply to people too, not just plants? Especially to people, Olivia replied. My dad always says that character is built through challenges, not comfort. Maybe this is your chance to build something new. A tentative understanding formed between the two young women. Not quite friendship yet, but a foundation of respect that might grow into something meaningful over time. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and shared commitments, Olivia found herself standing between her parents, watching as Principal Harrington, Chairman Donovan, and Senator Pierce outlined the logistics for today's announcement. Are you disappointed? Robert asked quietly. That there won't be a dramatic helicopter landing and public reckoning? Olivia shook her head. This is better. Real change doesn't usually happen through dramatic confrontations. It happens through difficult conversations and genuine commitments to do better. Catherine squeezed her daughter's shoulder proudly. That's wisdom beyond your years, Olivia. The most important victories aren't the ones that humiliate others. They're the ones that elevate everyone. As they left the conference room, the campus looked different to Olivia. Not because the buildings or grounds had changed, but because her relationship to them had transformed. She wasn't an outsider seeking acceptance anymore. She was a catalyst for positive change, someone whose presence had already made Westmont a better institution. The morning's events had unfolded in ways no one could have predicted. What might have been an adversarial confrontation had instead become an opportunity for reconciliation and institutional growth. As they walked across the quad where the presidential helicopter would have landed, Olivia reflected on the power of taking principled stands without seeking vengeance, of using moments of injustice as catalysts for broader change. Catherine's phone buzzed with a message. She checked it and smiled. The president sends his regards and his full support for our reformed approach. He's particularly impressed with the maturity shown by all parties in finding a constructive resolution. The president knows about this? Olivia asked, somewhat awestruck. Of course, Catherine replied simply. Educational equity is one of his top priorities. Your case has helped bring attention to issues that have been overlooked for too long. This broader significance of her experience gave Olivia a new perspective on what had happened. Her individual struggle had become part of something larger, a movement toward a more equitable educational system that recognized talent and potential regardless of background or circumstance. As they prepared to leave campus to finalize preparations for the afternoon's formal announcement, Wei Chen approached with several members of the genetics team. Olivia, your protocol worked perfectly, he reported excitedly, showing her photos of the successful plant hybridization. We've been running tests all morning. The submission is ready for the competition. That's great, Olivia replied sincerely. I'm glad you won't miss your opportunity because of what happened. Actually, another team member said hesitantly, we were wondering if you'd rejoin the team, not just for this competition, but permanently. It was your solution that made it possible. Before Olivia could respond, Principal Harrington approached their group. The principal's usual imposing presence had softened, though her dignity remained intact. Miss Harmon, she addressed Olivia formally, I've just signed the official rescission of your expulsion, effective immediately. There is no reason you couldn't represent Westmont at tomorrow's competition if you choose to do so. In fact, I would consider it an honor to have you representing our school." Olivia glanced at her parents, seeking their input. Robert nodded encouragingly, while Catherine gave her the slight smile that always meant, "This is your decision to make." "Thank you, Principal Harrington," Olivia replied. "I'd be honored to rejoin the team." As the impromptu gathering continued, Chairman Donovan engaged Robert in conversation about the Harmon farm, showing genuine interest in sustainable agriculture rather than condescension. Meanwhile, Catherine found herself surrounded by faculty members eager to discuss how Westmont could better support students from rural backgrounds. The atmosphere had transformed so completely that Olivia found herself momentarily disoriented. Was this the same institution that had so casually dismissed her just yesterday? The same people who had judged her as unworthy based solely on her background? The answer, she realized, was both yes and no. The structures were the same, but perspectives had shifted. And that shift, however catalyzed by the threat of a presidential helicopter and media exposure, represented real opportunity for lasting change. That afternoon, the sun cast a golden glow over Westmont Academy as preparations for the formal announcement accelerated. What had been planned as a confrontational assessment had transformed into a collaborative celebration of institutional change. The main quad, earlier marked for a helicopter landing, was now adorned with a small stage bearing both Westmont's emblem and the presidential seal. News vans lined the entrance, their satellite dishes raised toward the clear autumn sky. When Catherine had contacted the White House about the change in plans, the president himself had decided the new direction merited even greater promotion. This would no longer be a story about one school's failure, but about creating a nationwide model for educational equity. In the Westmont Auditorium, now serving as a staging area, Olivia stood quietly by the window, watching the gathering crowd. Students in their Westmont uniforms mingled with government officials, educational experts, and local dignitaries. The energy was palpable. Not the tense anticipation of conflict, but the vibrant hum of imminent positive change. "Nervous?" came Madison's voice as she approached cautiously, still unsure of her welcome after the morning's revelations. Olivia turned with a slight smile. "Not nervous, just processing. Yesterday I was packing my things, convinced I'd never set foot on this campus again. Now I'm part of a national education initiative." She shook her head in wonder. "Life takes unexpected turns." Madison nodded, fidgeting slightly with the sleeve of her blazer. "I've been thinking about what you said, about failure being information, not just an endpoint. No one's ever talked to me that way before. In my family, failure isn't an option, so when things go wrong, the instinct is to find someone else to blame." "That's a heavy burden to carry," Olivia observed. "It is," Madison agreed. "But watching you stand your ground with such dignity, even when facing expulsion, showed me another way to handle challenges." She hesitated before adding, "My father says I could learn a lot from you, and he's right." This candid admission, from someone who had viewed her as a threat just days ago, demonstrated how profoundly the dynamics at Westmont were already shifting. Before Olivia could respond, Catherine approached, now dressed in formal attire befitting her role as a presidential advisor. "They're ready for us," she informed them. "The Secretary of Education has arrived, and we'll be starting in 10 minutes. As Catherine led them toward the staging area, Olivia reflected on her mother's remarkable ability to navigate complex situations with both strategic brilliance and ethical clarity. These qualities had enabled her to rise from a small-town background to become one of the president's most trusted advisors, and had taught Olivia that one's origins need not limit one's impact. The formal ceremony began with Chairman Donovan welcoming the distinguished visitors and assembled Westmont community. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows illuminated the stage, where Principal Harrington sat alongside Catherine, Senator Pierce, the Secretary of Education, and representatives from the Rural Education Equity Initiative. Today marks a pivotal moment in Westmont Academy's 150-year history, Chairman Donovan began, his voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. We gather not simply to announce a policy change, but to commit to a fundamental re-examination of our institutional values and practices. His forthright acknowledgement of the need for change set the tone for the event, not defensive or apologetic, but forward-looking and purposeful. Principal Harrington took the podium next, her usual commanding presence now tempered with a new humility. Institutions, like individuals, face defining moments that test our commitment to our stated values, she began, making eye contact with the audience rather than reading from her prepared remarks. Yesterday, a situation arose that revealed a troubling disconnect between Westmont's professed commitment to excellence and our actual practices regarding students from diverse backgrounds. She paused, seeming to gather her courage before continuing. As an educational leader, I failed to live up to our highest ideals when I allowed biases about family background to influence a disciplinary decision. This failure, however, has created an unexpected opportunity for growth and transformation. As Principal Harrington outlined the 3 reforms Olivia had proposed, transparency, structural change, and accountability, murmurs of approval rippled through the audience. Many of the Westmont faculty nodded in agreement, perhaps having recognized these issues themselves, but lacking the platform to address them. When Catherine took the podium, the atmosphere shifted from one of institutional self-reflection to broader social purpose. Her presence commanded immediate respect, her words carrying the weight of her position and expertise. What we're witnessing today at Westmont Academy represents a microcosm of challenges facing elite educational institutions nationwide, she began. The barriers facing talented students from rural communities, working families, and non-traditional backgrounds remain stubbornly persistent despite decades of scholarship programs and diversity initiatives. She gestured toward the folder containing the Rural Education Equity Initiative. The President's Commission has been documenting these challenges systematically, not to shame institutions, but to create meaningful pathways for change. Today, Westmont Academy takes a courageous step toward becoming a model for that change. As Catherine detailed how Westmont would serve as a pilot school for new equity practices, Olivia watched the faces of her fellow students. Some showed skepticism, others hope, but most reflected a growing recognition that their school was embarking on something historically significant, a rethinking of excellence itself. The Secretary of Education spoke next, contextualizing Westmont's situation within national educational policy. True educational excellence cannot exist within closed ecosystems of privilege, she asserted. It requires the constant infusion of diverse talents, perspectives, and experiences. What Westmont begins today has the potential to influence educational practices across the country. When Senator Pierce rose to speak, he departed from the expected political rhetoric. Instead, he spoke as a father who had witnessed his daughter's moral growth through this challenging situation. "Our children are watching how we handle our mistakes," he said, glancing toward Madison in the front row. "When we choose accountability over defensiveness, when we prioritize integrity over image, we teach them leadership lessons more valuable than any classroom instruction." The most unexpected speaker came next. Madison Pierce approached the podium with visible nervousness, but determined purpose. This had not been part of the planned program, but Chairman Donovan nodded his approval as she adjusted the microphone. "I need to acknowledge my role in recent events," she began, her voice initially uncertain but growing stronger. "I misrepresented Olivia Harmon's actions because I felt threatened by her abilities. My dishonesty contributed to an unjust expulsion, and for that I am deeply sorry." A hush fell over the audience as Madison continued. "Olivia didn't just solve our hybridization problems. She showed all of us what real scientific integrity and personal dignity look like. And even after being wrongly expelled, she sent us detailed protocols to ensure our team's success in today's competition." Madison turned to look directly at Olivia. "That kind of character deserves recognition, not punishment. I'm committed to learning from this experience and helping build a more equitable Westmont." The spontaneous applause that followed wasn't just for Madison's courage in admitting her mistake. It was an acknowledgement that something fundamental was shifting at Westmont, a recognition that true excellence came in many forms and from unexpected places. Chairman Donovan returned to the podium to introduce the final speaker. "It is my honor to invite to the stage the person whose dignity and wisdom in the face of injustice catalyzed these important changes. Please welcome Olivia Harmon." Olivia had not expected to speak. As she rose from her seat, a momentary panic gripped her, but then she caught her father's encouraging smile from the audience and her mother's subtle nod from the stage. Their belief in her had never wavered, even when institutions had failed her. Drawing strength from that knowledge, she approached the podium with measured steps. "Thank you, Chairman Donovan," she began, her voice clear and steady. "When I earned a scholarship to Westmont last spring, I believed I was being given access to educational excellence. What I've learned this week is that excellence isn't something that exists within these walls waiting to be accessed. It's something we create together through our actions and choices." She looked out at the assembled students, faculty, and visitors. "The knowledge I brought from my rural background, expertise in plant genetics developed in our greenhouse, wasn't less valuable because it wasn't acquired in a prestigious setting. Different doesn't mean deficient, and institutions are strongest when they recognize the unique contributions each person brings." Olivia gestured toward the Westmont emblem displayed on the stage. "Your motto is excellence without excuse. Moving forward, I hope we can expand our understanding of what excellence truly means, not just academic achievement or family connections, but also moral courage, intellectual integrity, and respect for diverse paths to knowledge." As she concluded her remarks, Olivia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. This wasn't just about personal vindication. It was about helping transform an institution so that other students wouldn't face the barriers she had encountered. That perspective gave meaning to the challenges she had endured. The formal ceremony transitioned to a reception where representatives from the Rural Education Equity Initiative mingled with Westmont faculty, discussing practical implementations of the proposed reforms. Olivia found herself surrounded by classmates who had previously kept their distance, now eager to express their support or ask questions about her experiences. Principal Harrington approached, carrying a folder emblazoned with the Westmont crest. "Miss Harmon, a moment of your time." Stepping aside from the crowd, the principal handed Olivia the folder. "These are the application materials for the Westmont Scientific Leadership Program. It's typically reserved for seniors, but your work in plant genomics and your handling of this week's events demonstrate precisely the qualities the program seeks to develop." Olivia accepted the folder with surprise. "Thank you, Principal Harrington." "It's I who should thank you," the principal replied, the formality in her voice giving way to genuine emotion. "Your presence at Westmont has already made us a better institution. I hope you'll consider this opportunity to help lead the changes you've inspired." This simple acknowledgement of her potential contribution not as a token scholarship student, but as a valued leader, represented everything Olivia had hoped for when she first arrived at Westmont. Not special treatment or recognition, but genuine inclusion based on her merits and character. As the reception continued, Catherine found a quiet moment with her daughter. "Proud doesn't begin to cover what I'm feeling right now," she said, embracing Olivia. "You turned an injustice into an opportunity for systemic change. That's a rare kind of leadership." "I had good teachers," Olivia replied, looking meaningfully at both her parents as Robert joined them. The family's moment was interrupted by Dr. Eleanor Jensen, Olivia's mentor from the summer biogenetics program, who had arrived for the announcement. "I knew you were talented," Dr. Jensen said, approaching with a warm smile, "but I didn't realize you were also a catalyst for institutional reform. That's an impressive combination in someone so young." As they chatted about Olivia's recent work, Dr. Jensen offered an unexpected opportunity. The Agricultural Innovation Lab has received funding for a youth mentorship program. "We're looking for promising young scientists to pair with rural schools, showing students that scientific excellence can grow anywhere. Would you be interested in helping develop the program model?" The synchronicity of this opportunity with the day's events wasn't lost on Olivia. Her personal challenge had connected with broader movements for change in ways she couldn't have anticipated. "I'd be honored," she replied, already envisioning how her experiences could help other students navigate similar pathways. As evening approached and the formal event wound down, the Harmon family prepared to return home. The day had been transformative in ways none of them could have predicted. Chairman Donovan accompanied them to the parking lot, where Robert's pickup truck stood among the government vehicles and luxury cars. "You know," the chairman remarked, "when I first heard about the presidential helicopter, I imagined this day ending very differently." Catherine smiled. "The helicopter was always a contingency plan, not the preferred approach. Real change happens through conversation and commitment, not through spectacle and shame. A lesson many of us needed to learn," Chairman Donovan acknowledged. "We've been so focused on maintaining Westmont's prestige that we forgot what truly creates educational excellence." He turned to Olivia. "Your contribution to Westmont will extend far beyond your time as a student here. The reforms you've sparked will benefit generations to come." As they drove back toward their farm, the setting sun bathed the countryside in amber light. Fields stretched endlessly on either side of the highway, a reminder of the rural roots that had shaped Olivia's unique perspective and talents. "You were amazing today," Robert said proudly, glancing at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "Standing up there addressing all those officials and reporters like you'd been doing it your whole life." "I was terrified," Olivia admitted with a laugh. "But then I remembered what you always say about harvest season, that you can't control the weather, only how you respond to it. This was just another kind of unexpected season to navigate." Catherine reached back to squeeze her daughter's hand. That ability to adapt and find opportunity in challenge, that's what makes rural communities so resilient. It's a strength too often overlooked by institutions like Westmont. As they turned onto the gravel road leading to their property, Olivia considered how differently she now viewed both Westmont and her place within it. What had begun as a desperate fight for acceptance had evolved into something more meaningful, a chance to help reshape an institution from within, to make it more welcoming for others who would follow. 3 weeks later, Olivia stood beside Madison in the State University auditorium, awaiting the announcement of the International Youth Science Congress results. Their plant hybridization project, successfully completed using Olivia's protocols, had advanced to the final round of judging. The genetics team's experience over the past weeks had been transformative. not just scientifically, but in how they collaborated across different backgrounds and perspectives. And first place in the agricultural innovation category, the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, goes to Westmont Academy for their groundbreaking work on drought-resistant crop hybridization. The team erupted in cheers, embracing each other in celebration. As they approached the stage to accept their award, Madison stepped back, gently pushing Olivia forward to accept the trophy. It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one, an acknowledgement of Olivia's essential contribution and leadership. Later, as they gathered around a table at the university cafe to celebrate, Wei Chen raised his glass of sparkling cider. To Olivia, who not only saved our project but transformed our school. It wasn't me alone, Olivia demurred, uncomfortable with being singled out. It took all of us standing together for what was right. That's true, Madison agreed, but it started with your courage. Before all this happened, I never questioned the status quo at Westmont. Now I can't stop seeing how it needs to change. Their conversation was interrupted by a notification on Olivia's tablet, an email from the Rural Education Equity Initiative. The pilot program at Westmont had generated such positive attention that 5 other prestigious academies had requested to join the initiative. Olivia had been asked to serve on the Student Advisory Board, helping shape implementation across all participating schools. Good news? Wei asked, noting her expression. The best kind, Olivia replied. The changes we started are spreading. 6 months later, Olivia stood before a very different audience, a classroom of middle school students at Riverdale Valley Rural School, where she had once attended. Behind her, Madison and Wei helped distribute materials for a hands-on genetics workshop, part of the new science outreach program they had developed with Dr. Jensen's lab. Before we start today's experiment, Olivia told the eager young faces, I want to tell you something important. Excellence doesn't belong to anyone, place, school, or type of person. It grows wherever passion, curiosity, and perseverance are nurtured. She gestured toward the simple classroom around them. I learned my first lessons in genetics right here, using basic materials and borrowed textbooks. That foundation was strong enough to take me to Westmont Academy and beyond. Not because I left these rural roots behind, but because I brought their strength with me. As the students began their experiments, Olivia moved among them, offering guidance and encouragement. She recognized in their eager questions and tentative hypotheses the same curiosity that had driven her own scientific journey. You remind me of myself at your age, she told a girl who had designed a particularly creative approach to the experiment. Never stop asking questions that others aren't asking. That's how innovation happens. Madison, observing this exchange, approached Olivia during a break. You know, 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined spending my Saturday in a rural school teaching kids about genetics. Now, it's the highlight of my week. That's the thing about breaking down barriers, Olivia replied. It doesn't just help those who were excluded, it enriches everyone's experience. Back at Westmont, the reforms sparked by Olivia's case had taken root and flourished. A new equity review board, including students, faculty, and outside experts, evaluated all disciplinary actions to ensure fairness across different student demographics. A mentorship program paired scholarship students with peers and faculty to help navigate the institution's unwritten rules and expectations. And perhaps most significantly, the admissions office had launched a rural talent initiative, actively recruiting promising students from farming communities and small towns. Principal Harrington, true to her commitment, had led these changes with unexpected passion. Her own background as a scholarship student, long hidden behind a veneer of elitism, now informed her approach to leadership. She had become an outspoken, advocate for educational equity at conferences and in professional publications, sharing Westmont's journey as a model for other institutions. 1 year after the day a presidential helicopter nearly landed on Westmont's quad, Catherine Harmon stood in the actual East Wing of the White House, presenting the findings from the Rural Education Equity Initiative to the President and his education policy team. The data from Westmont and other pilot schools showed promising results, reduced disciplinary disparities, improved academic outcomes for scholarship students, and increased overall institutional innovation. The most significant finding, Catherine explained, pointing to a graph on her presentation, is how these equity reforms benefit all students, not just those from underrepresented backgrounds. When institutions become more inclusive, everyone's educational experience is enhanced. "And your daughter?" the President asked with genuine interest, having followed the story that had launched the initiative. "How has she fared at Westmont since these changes began?" Catherine smiled with quiet pride. "Olivia has thrived, Mr. President. She's currently developing a peer support network for scholarship students that's being adopted by schools across the country. And her research on sustainable agriculture has received national recognition." "Remarkable," the President nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps we should consider expanding this initiative nationwide. The talent we're overlooking in rural America represents an untapped national resource." "That's precisely our recommendation," Catherine agreed, turning to the final slide of her presentation. "Not as a matter of charity or social justice alone, though those are valid considerations, but as a strategic investment in America's future innovation and leadership." As Catherine concluded her presentation to enthusiastic support from the assembled officials, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple act of bias against a farmer's daughter. What might have remained an isolated injustice had instead catalyzed a movement that was transforming educational access across the country. That evening, Catherine called home from her hotel in Washington. Olivia answered, surrounded by research papers spread across the kitchen table of their farmhouse. "How did the presentation go?" Olivia asked eagerly. "Better than we could have hoped," Catherine replied. "The President has authorized nationwide expansion of the initiative. 20 more schools will join next semester." Olivia's expression brightened with excitement. "That's incredible, Mom. So many students will benefit." "All because you stood your ground when faced with injustice," Catherine reminded her. "Never underestimate how one person's courage can create ripples of change." After they finished their call, Olivia stepped out onto the farmhouse porch, gazing at the stars that shone brilliantly over their fields. The contrast between this peaceful rural setting and the White House, where her mother had presented today, struck her as profoundly meaningful. Both spaces, the farm and the corridors of power, had shaped her identity and her understanding of leadership. Her father joined her on the porch, handing her a mug of hot cider. "Penny for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about paths," Olivia replied thoughtfully. "How a year ago I thought there was only one path to success, leaving this place behind for schools like Westmont. Now I understand that true excellence means forging connections between different worlds, not abandoning one for another." Robert nodded, looking out over the land that had sustained their family for generations. "That's wisdom your grandmother would appreciate. She always said the strongest plants have the deepest roots but still reach for the sun." As father and daughter stood quietly under the vast rural sky, the distant sound of a helicopter echoed faintly, not a presidential aircraft this time, but a medical transport heading toward the regional hospital. Olivia smiled at the symbolism. The helicopter that never landed had ultimately created more positive change than if it had arrived with all its dramatic power. The following morning, Olivia's story appeared in the national education section of major newspapers, not as a scandal about discrimination, but as an inspiring example of how confronting inequity could lead to institutional transformation. The headline read, "From Farm to Famous Academy, How One Student's Stand Changed American Education." The article detailed the Rural Education Equity Initiative's success and national expansion, with Olivia's experience serving as its catalyst. It also highlighted the unexpected leadership of Principal Harrington, who had transformed from defender of the status quo to champion of change. Senator Pierce was quoted praising the initiative's impact. "My daughter's experience working alongside Olivia Harmon has been more valuable to her development than any conventional education we could have provided. These reforms aren't just benefiting scholarship students, they're creating better leaders across the board." The reporter had interviewed Olivia at the Harmon farm, and the article included her perspective on navigating elite institutions while remaining connected to rural values. "Excellence isn't defined by geography or pedigree," she had told them. "It's cultivated through integrity, perseverance, and the courage to bring your authentic self to every environment, even when others question whether you belong." This philosophy had become the unofficial motto of the Student Support Network. She had developed, now active in 15 schools, and growing rapidly. What had begun as a response to her own challenges had evolved into a nationwide movement empowering students from non-traditional backgrounds to navigate elite institutions, while maintaining their unique perspectives and values. 5 years later, Olivia Harmon stood at a podium in Westmont Academy's newly constructed Equity Innovation Center, addressing the incoming class of scholarship students. Now, a graduate student at Cornell University, where she was developing breakthrough approaches to sustainable agriculture, she returned annually to speak to students following the path she had helped forge. "When I first arrived at Westmont, I believed I needed to hide my background to fit in," she told the attentive faces before her. "I thought excellence meant conforming to established patterns and hierarchies. What I discovered through challenge is that true excellence emerges when we bring our authentic selves to every endeavor, when we see our differences not as deficits to overcome, but as unique perspectives to contribute." The Westmont that welcomed these new students was profoundly different from the institution Olivia had entered 5 years earlier. The reforms catalyzed by her experience had taken root and flourished, creating a culture that valued diverse backgrounds, not merely as token representations, but as essential sources of innovation and leadership. "The most important lesson I learned at Westmont wasn't in any classroom," Olivia concluded. "It was that systems only change when people within them find the courage to question assumptions, to stand up for principles even at personal cost, and to imagine better ways forward." As her words resonated across the room, Olivia knew that the presidential helicopter that never landed had ultimately created more positive change than if it had arrived with all its dramatic power. The true triumph hadn't been a moment of vindication, but the lasting transformation of an institution that now served as a model for educational equity across the country. And in that transformation lay the deepest lesson of all, that justice, achieved through reconciliation and growth, creates more lasting change than justice imposed through power and shame. That understanding had shaped not just Olivia's education, but her approach to leadership in every aspect of her life. The journey that had begun with a principal's dismissive words about a farmer's daughter had evolved into something none of the participants could have imagined, a nationwide movement that was slowly but surely redefining excellence itself in American education. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.